Good morning. This is Barry Knapp with Ironsides Macroeconomics. It's Monday morning, March 31st, last day of the quarter at 5:50 a.m. Mountain Time. Uh, I've been staring at the ceiling since 4 a.m., anticipating what was to come this week. Our note this week was titled "More Carrot, Less Stick." It's been 5 weeks since we wrote our note cleaning up the industrial policy mess and talked about the likely trajectory for growth, which is lower in the first half of the year as a consequence of spending cuts. And then we would expect to get private sector capital investment to rebound in the second half of the year, which is our industrial policy mess we talked about. And obviously, we've been quite bearish. We were expecting a 10 to 12% correction in the S&P 500. We got that over the course of 3 weeks. We thought 10-year treasuries would rally to a 420 yield. We got that in a week. We now think that rally is going to extend further, and we've recommended adding some exposure to the back end of the treasury market. But we've been cautioning that although we hit those targets, the process was just beginning to play out. And I think that's important to realize that even with this deterioration in growth, all the GDP forecast cuts we've seen, one of my former colleagues from Barclays was on talking about their global outlook and their forecast for GDP of less than 1% this year. Goldman Sachs's numbers getting, all over Twitter over the course of the weekend. And what's important about all that is that the spending cuts haven't even really begun. So this is just about a business confidence shock associated with trade policy. The spending cuts, which are likely to have a negative impact on growth and employment, haven't really even kicked in. The DOGE stuff is small relative to what Congress is likely to enact through the reconciliation process. So the Friday's report, income, spending, and inflation report, for us was a real game changer. And what's crucial about that is the income numbers on the surface looked strong, but they were boosted by direct government transfer payments. Remember, the Biden administration loosened the eligibility requirements on Medicaid, on food stamps, on housing assistance, on Obamacare. So that actually contributed about half of the income growth last month and is boosting direct transfer payments as a percent of personal income. Still, government spending through the last Treasury statement is running 13 and change percent above the first 5 months of the prior year. So we still have spending contributing positively. The spending numbers were weak. The inflation numbers were hot, but the market reaction, a bull flattening of the Treasury curve, meaning the back end rallying more, led by TIPS yields or real rates, break-evens barely budging, is a clear sign and should be a message to the Federal Reserve. The market is looking through any near-term inflationary impact of tariffs to the impact on growth. Like in 2018 and 2019, this is a bigger threat to growth. It's more disinflationary or even deflationary in a sense than it is inflationary. And that's how the Fed should be thinking about this. They likely will if we get the type of employment report we expect on Friday. Now, we're going to put out a full review of that Tuesday. To see the entire note, consider becoming a full subscriber and supporting our work. But it is likely that the labor market will start to, and in February, mind you, the report was weak when you looked at all the details. People like Chair Powell saying, it looked relatively okay on the headline. We don't even understand where that came from because 150,000 jobs was comprised of 1 million part-time jobs and a loss of 850,000 full-time jobs. The underemployment rate went up 0.5% from 7.5 to 8. Was not a strong report, and we don't expect a strong report this go around either. That will likely lead to a Fed verbal pivot, open mouth operations, but growth is clearly weakening here. So we'd be adding some duration in the back end. We would not really be committing large amounts of money to the equity market, even if we make a marginal new low, which we expect. There's a possibility through earnings season that net revisions might start to bottom out, and we might get the conditions in place at that point when we start pushing beyond all this stick, trade policy and spending cuts, and start focusing on supply side tax cuts, which are coming. This isn't just an extension of TCJA. The Biden administration stopped a lot of the corporate tax incentives that were in TCJA. So there is some carrot coming, but we're not there yet. So keep your powder dry. Barry Knapp from Ironsides. Have a good week, everyone. Thanks.